enthusiastically model digital literacy skills by pulling up any software program or website that you often use or are asking your students to use. And as you pull it up, talk through what you're doing and explain why.
Welcome to a new episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. We're finishing up the year strong with some interviews, some solo episodes, and some ideas that you can take into 2024. If you're joining us in November and December, wishing you a great finish to the calendar year. If you're listening to this episode later on in the school year, welcome. Appreciate you stopping by. If we haven't met before, my name is Monica Burns. I'm a former New York City public school teacher, still here on the East Coast, and love to share my favorite tips, tricks, and strategies for technology integration. In this podcast episode, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. I started the podcast in 2019, and each episode is designed to give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Don't forget to head to classtechtips.com/podcast for the show notes for each and every episode. This episode is brought to you by Ozobot, the trailblazer in reshaping education through robotics. Their award-winning programmable robots and coding programs have revolutionized STEAM learning, and now their new Ozobot robotic arm is here to bring classroom learning to the next level. The Ozobot robotic arm is a collaborative robot that brings process engineering and automation to life through a unique CTE perspective. Unlike other robotic arm solutions, the Ozobot robotic arm is the future of hands-on immersive learning. Don't miss out. Visit ozobot.com/Aura. That's ORA to discover the evolution of STEM education. This week's episode is titled Unlocking Digital Literacy with Practical Classroom Strategies, with Dr. Jenna Kammer and Dr. Lauren Hayes, who have a new book with ISTE coming out this month. It's called Digital Literacy Made Simple, and I love that title. I think it's perfect for what we talk about today, too. Teaching digital literacy can definitely feel intimidating, but Dr. Hayes and Dr. Kammer break it down in this conversation, and you are going to hear some practical strategies that you can try out tomorrow or recommend to a colleague. Let's dive into the conversation. Welcome to the Easy EdTech podcast. I'm so excited to chat with you both today about digital literacy, practical classroom strategies. But before we dive in, I'd love to hear a little bit about both of your backgrounds. What are your roles in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
I am Lauren Hayes, and I'm an associate professor of instructional technology at the University of Central Missouri. And every day in this job is a little bit different, which is one reason that I really love this job. I really just enjoy the diversity of things that I get to do in any given day, in any given week. That said, there are, of course, some common things that I do every day. I teach asynchronous online courses, and I have 4 a semester. And so each day I typically give feedback to students. I'm participating in course discussions. I'm advising students on their degree programs. And then I'm always, I try to carve out time every day to do a little bit of research and stay current on educational technology, because as we all know, this topic changes all the time, and I can feel that I can get behind very fast, especially in the area of artificial intelligence, because I think that's what everybody's talking about at the moment. And so every day I try to spend, even if it's only 15 minutes, just doing a little bit of reading, playing with a new tool, just to stay current.
I'm right there with you, Lauren. I feel like I need to carve out some time to go through my AI newsletters at the end of each day. Jenna, would love to hear about your role in education. What does your day-to-day look like?
I am also an associate professor in library science. I'm also the program coordinator. Dr. Hayes and I are colleagues in the same department. So I have a similar job with different students. So our students are library science students. They're preparing to be school librarians. So I also teach online, and our students interact in discussion boards. My day-to-day will include giving them feedback on their projects, working with them on research projects, and talking to new students about what program and classes are best for them to take. I also started out as a reference librarian and an instructional designer. So both of those roles have involved working with students who are doing research. So that's something that I really love about my job right now, is that I still get to work with students who are doing research. So I help them in their graduate study. And then I also prepare them to be able to teach research to the students in their schools.
I'm excited to have both of your perspectives here. I know you both have been working in this space, right? Writing about this topic, thinking deeply about this topic. And for so many educators who are tackling, digital literacy and what that means for them and with the students that they support, would love to hear from you on what are the fundamental elements of digital literacy? Why are they crucial for students to understand?
So there are a lot of definitions of digital literacy dating back to the 90s, when Paul Gister said that digital literacy is a set of skills to access the internet, find, manage, and edit digital information, join in communications, and otherwise engage with an online information and communication network. And that's a quote from him. And then the quote continues that digital literacy is the ability to properly use and evaluate digital resources, tools, and services and apply it to lifelong learning. So there's that more historical, perspective on digital literacy. But as we know that a lot has changed with technology in that amount of time. And ISTE has defined digital literacy as being able to use technologies effectively and being able to effectively discover, analyze, create, and communicate with information using digital tools and resources. And so in this definition from ISTE, I think you'll see there's a focus on kind of the skills, discover, analyze, create, communicate. And Dr. Kammer and I both agree with that focus on skills, but also really like to mention the importance of mental habits for digital literacy. And we, in a previous book we worked on together, defined digital literacy as the ability to evaluate and critique information that's created and shared in digital mediums. And then to be digitally literate, persons must develop the mental habits to adjust to new digital tools and content. So if we're thinking back to that just kind of brief definition of digital literacy, for us, I think it's both a skill set and ways of thinking that are really important as we think about how to develop digital literacy in ourselves and in our students.
Yeah. And, in your book, you talk about this importance of the skills, right? Integrating digital literacy skills across content areas, which I think is something that, listeners of the podcast might teach just one content area. They might support educators who are in a variety, right, of different environments. Can you share some specific examples of how this can be done effectively, how you can integrate digital literacy skills into a variety of content areas?
So sure. One example is, let's just start with English language arts. So in ELA, your students are often writing papers. And many students write their papers using Google Docs. The Google Workspace suite is commonly used in K-12 schools. And so Google Docs is often what students use to write those papers. However, we know that Microsoft Word, for example, and the Office suite is used in a lot of workplace settings. Google is too, but there's often that Microsoft suite too. And so as we're thinking about our high school students may need familiarity with Microsoft Word, for example, so that they can be successful when they go to their work setting. So if students don't have access to another word processing software like Microsoft Word, if the teacher maybe can schedule some time if there's a computer lab at their school still doesn't always exist, or work to advocate for access to the Office suite so their students can get some familiarity with those tools. But just giving students the opportunity to write a paper, even if it's just a paragraph in a different kind of word processing software, the teacher doesn't have to change any of the assignments that they're doing. It's just giving them exposure to a different tool that they're going to need as they go into the workplace and thinking about that college and career readiness piece. Another example would be maybe in a science classroom where, Skype a scientist is still, a thing and teachers are using it. And so before the session, a teacher could have a discussion with students about digital communication technologies and how they allow people to connect with others all over the world. The teacher can also ask students how they should behave when using these digital communication tools. And then they can brainstorm as a class together about what that kind of appropriate behavior would look like, and even have a discussion about why that's appropriate behavior for that type of environment. Again, not taking a lot of time or even doing something extra that they might not want to include or take time out from their classroom if they're already going to be using Skype a scientist or bringing in a guest speaker in that type of format. Just take 5 minutes beforehand and have a conversation in class about those digital communication skills.
I love that both of those are ones you could replicate really in any subject area. Taking something you're already doing, that you've already prepped for, but placing it in another digital space, right? Or carving out that time to prep for a digital experience that in the long run, right, is going to make things easier for everyone and give students an opportunity to, build that skill set, build their muscles around it. And so, this might connect to the next question I have for you, because your book emphasizes this idea of creating a learning culture for digital literacy, which, I imagine even from an educator mindset, right? You need to think about like, oh, this is important. This is what I want to prioritize. This is how I could inject this. So could you explain what this means, right? Creating a learning culture for digital literacy and how educators can cultivate that in their learning environments?
The idea of the learning culture in our book is to recognize that within a school, there's a lot of experts within their area who have a lot of different skills. And it's drawing on those skills and between the different teachers, the different staff, administrators, and even students to kind of work together to cultivate digital literacy. So for example, could involve collaboration. So between a teacher and a school librarian. It could also involve system integration. So working with tech support, so that tech support understands issues you might be having in the classroom that are slowing down digital literacy. But just kind of taking inventory of who you have available to you within the school and how what everyone can offer each other. The learning culture extends outside of the school as well. So especially classroom teachers and within different content areas, there are associations and different personal learning networks where there is also a lot of expertise. So you can think about how what you're doing in your classroom prepares students who are going to the next phase. So for example, if you are a middle school teacher, your students are going to high school. And so that's also part of your learning culture. So what you're doing in middle school impacts how they come into the high school, and the same for college. So it's just like your culture is your system, essentially. So in the simplest form, so I come from a library background. So our school librarians learn how to collaborate and work with classroom teachers. So a classroom teacher may invite a school librarian into the class to talk about doing research and using search terms and helping to cite sources for a research project. So the students are learning from the school librarian in addition to what they're learning about the content within the classroom.
I love those connections in the vertical planning too, right? Just anticipating what do I hope this student has right before they come into this space? What am I preparing them for? What do I know that the next step for them is going to incorporate? So I think that's such a great way to envision, the culture of a school, right? Or district around this, that you are really embracing the expertise of the members of your community and you're thinking in kind of all directions of what this can look like, right, from an implementation standpoint. So, are there some simple strategies that teachers can use to discuss and to model digital literacy skills in their classroom? Because there's something that they could put into practice right away, try out tomorrow, or try out, in the upcoming week?
Absolutely. That's really the goal of the book. We want everyone to realize that they can do simple things every day to include digital literacy skills in their curriculum. And to start, we really want teachers to think about what they're already doing and ask themselves, is there a way that they can be maybe more transparent with what they're doing with digital tools? Because this is probably the easiest way to start, at least in my opinion. So for example, you can discuss, and we describe it in the book as enthusiastically model digital literacy skills by pulling up any software program or website that you often use or are asking your students to use. And as you pull it up, talk through what you're doing and explain why. This is just showing it on the screen. Maybe you often leave the blank as you're pulling things up and walking and navigating the site, but instead turn on the screen so that students can see what you're doing. Explain your thoughts as you navigate to different pages, click on buttons, browse the menu. And so to do this, you don't have to do anything new. But you're only explaining to students what you're already doing with the technology that you're using every day. And it can just be as simple as, I'm going up to File because I know that if I click File, it's going to give me an option to save. And at an elementary level, it might be something that students just didn't know. And if you could just say that, and that can just be something that they learn just from that one simple act of you saying it and showing it as you're doing it.
Such a great example. Yeah, the idea of, thinking aloud, right? You're already doing this, but you're just making it transparent. We think aloud when we solve a math problem and model it to students, right? We think aloud when we're pointing to something in a piece of children's literature. So I think that's such a great reminder for educators. I know that you keep adding. Yeah, I don't want to interrupt as you're thinking through these strategies.
I was just going to add that another example would be file structure. So we hear a lot about teachers having issues with students being able to organize their files and understanding a systematic organization so that they can retrieve them later and know where they are. And so one thing we maybe don't often do is sometimes we have the files open for students already, right? When they're ready, when students come in, allowing them to watch us or open up an organized file structure, then explaining how I keep my lesson content within the unit folder and just saving so that it can be easily retrieved later is something that students, especially today, who are used to working on mobile devices with different file structures, may be able to benefit from.
That's such a great example because, and as I think, about the interactions that listeners might have with their colleague, maybe someone who's hesitant to introduce something like this or feels like it's another thing, all it takes is the transparency, right? Opening up and showing that file structure, making a comparison to an experience, that they're having, right, on a different device. Right? These are things that are so organic, right, and authentic in our everyday interactions with students. So I just love anchoring these skills, right, into the work that's already happening because it doesn't have to be, another thing on the list. So how can educators stay updated and adapt their strategies as technology continues to evolve? I know you mentioned it already about how quickly things are changing, the AI of it all, right? How can they stay up to date as things are moving and evolving?
One thing we talk about in the book is starting with yourself. It can feel overwhelming to stay current, as I've already mentioned. And to help with this, we just suggest, engaging in professional development that's specifically related to technology. But we're not suggesting that it take a lot of your time. Instead, find an Instagram account that you can follow that might give you tech news and kind of bite-sized chunks that you can explore in more detail than if you wish. Subscribe to an educational technology magazine that'll send electronic issues to your inbox. And while it can be good to do more than one thing for professional development, we think it's important to kind of swap those PD strategies. So one day, look at the Instagram site. Another day, spend 5 minutes in that EdTech magazine. A few days later, maybe have a hallway conversation with some colleagues about something that they're doing in their class with technology. But again, just start with yourself. And I think that could be a way of staying current, but not getting overwhelmed, maybe.
Yeah. And I would also add to build on the learning community that you have available to you. So invite a collaborator in. So someone who already knows how to do it. Let them do a mini lesson for your student this year. Next year, you'll know how to do it yourself. So if there's something new that you are interested in trying, but you're not feeling very confident, let someone else do it this time and learn from them. And I might also add, if I could add, I would suggest listening to this podcast. Mm-hmm. So there's some really great ideas on the Easy EdTech podcast. And there are digital literacy elements for a lot of the different things. So, and one of my favorites was the one with Sheila Kennedy about joy spotting. Mm-hmm. That was a great one. And so she talks about using mobile devices to take pictures of things that make you happy in the day, right? So the digital literacy component of that, the skills would be creating the content and sharing it. And the critical component would be understanding that media invokes emotion, so that there are different tones that are expressed when media is created. So it's just kind of thinking about the things that you're already doing or that you learn from great podcasts. And then where is that digital literacy component in there?
I love that connection or that extension, right? Like if you've tried out this one thing, like that joy spotting activity, if you're already going to pull up that website, right, for your students to see, like, where can you place this in? So I love that just intention, right, alongside all the things that are already happening. It doesn't have to be another thing, but it's kind of been there the whole time, I think, right? Or we can create some of these strategies. So this was so wonderful to chat with you both about your work, about your new book. I'm going to link out so listeners can find everything and learn more. But where can they connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work?
So we did share social media information in the show notes, and we're both at the University of Central Missouri. So you can, of course, find us there. And I'll only speak for myself, but I'm always interested in connecting with teachers on the topic of digital literacy. And so I'd really love to hear from any listeners what you're doing and maybe what resonates with you from the book. And so feel free to send me an email, connect on social media. I'd love to have a conversation, talk to some learning communities. That would be a lot of fun.
All right, great. Well, thank you both so much for sharing. I'm going to link out to all the ways for listeners to connect with you both, including your new book. But thank you both for your time today.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
This was such a fun, actionable conversation. And let's finish up with a few key points from the episode to make this EdTech easy. Model how you navigate digital spaces. Think aloud as you show off technology. Look for small ways to introduce digital literacy skills. Leverage your professional community for ideas and support. Remember, you can find the show notes and full list of resources from today's episode, including all of the ways to connect with Dr. Jenna Kammer and Dr. Lauren Hayes at classtechtips.com/podcast and finding today's episode number 245. A big thank you to Ozobot, our sponsor for this episode. Ozobot is the trailblazer in reshaping education through robotics with their award-winning programmable robots and coding programs that have revolutionized STEAM learning. And their newest innovation is here to take hands-on immersive learning to the next level. If you're looking to transform STEM learning in the classroom, the new Ozobot robotic arm is for you. Visit ozobot.com/Aura, that's ORA, to discover the evolution of STEM education. Thanks again for tuning in to another Tuesday episode of the Easy EdTech podcast, Whether you've been here for the first 200 or so episodes or tuning in for the first time today, so glad you stopped by. Make sure to hit that follow button on your podcast app. That way, next week's new episode will be waiting for you first thing Tuesday morning. I also have some bonus episodes on the schedule for the next few months that I know you'll want to check out too.